The boats in this weekend's regatta may not be the biggest or the grandest you'll ever see, but they all have one thing in common. They have spent the last 2 days cruising around the waterways of Port Macquarie, and their skippers have loved every minute of it. That's been the idea of the whole weekend, to encourage more people to use the river for recreation. The historical theme, tracing the path of town founder John Oxley, proved popular with many, who dressed in period costume for this morning's blessing of the fleet by Father Leo Dowling. Festivities were organised by Port Macquarie Tourism, and if the amount of interest shown in them is any indication, the local waterways are about to become a very busy place.
Vivian Lattimore has only been able to train for the past 6 weeks for this event, while most of her counterparts have spent a solid 12 months on their workouts. But she came out delivering her routine in almost faultless fashion, dropping only a few points for mechanical glitches.
I felt a little flat tonight, perhaps due to food intake or something along those lines. I just didn't spark.
Watching her 2-minute workout though, it would be pretty hard to pick up that she was actually scared.
I get very nervous at competitions, so it's an achievement for me just to actually get out on stage.
However, once the bronze medal was safely around her neck, she did reveal the competition secret.
As they introduced, I have a little nip of brandy just before I go on, and it sort of settles the butterflies in the stomach.
Vivian begins as an instructor in Newcastle early next year.
At the Civic Playhouse today, final rehearsals for The Girls Gotta Eat, which also opens tomorrow night. It's a show inspired by Naomi Wolf's book The Beauty Myth and the cast's desire to perform together.
We got together and wrote a bit of a storyline and sat in Sarah's lounge room and tried to crack jokes and things like that, and then we put all the movement to it, and that's basically how it all started.
It's the comic tale of 3 corporate businesswomen heading off for a girls' night out.
And they get very messy, you know, they go out and they drink too much and they use various substances. And then they go to the disco, and at the same time they're actually undercutting each other in dodgy business deals and sleeping with the same man. And they get very messy, they have a big fight, and then they bond.
It's a bit of a peephole on the private side of what we go through.
And what 90s woman hasn't gone through this?
We have girls sitting in the front row going, oh my God, Sandra, it's you, and oh, Jesus, it's me, and all of that sort of stuff.
The show plays until December the 11th.
It's only just over 2 weeks since parking meters were removed from the city centre. Some retailers say it's already affecting business.
They could come in luxury knowing that their cars would be fine out there and they have their hair done, relax, and now they're constantly, and we're constantly worried about whether they're going to be booked or not.
Catherine Stewart says her concerns are shared by others.
In King Street, where there's a lot of retailers there, they're not very happy at all. I mean, their customers are in there shopping, even other hairdressers, I've heard complaints from them as well, that, an hour is just not long enough and people are getting booked.
But traffic police say they're handing out less fines compared to the same time last year. Free parking was designed to lure shoppers back to the CBD, but the time restrictions are boosting parking stations and turning others away.
No, we just parked at David Jones car park, so quite easy.
Because of the hour limit, one never knows how long one's going to be in here anyway, so park in a place where you know your unrestricted time.
Well, not enough time to do your shopping.
I don't think 1 hour's enough.
Next week, a city centre meeting will discuss concerns raised so far. High on the agenda, the future of the 1 hour parking limit.
If that is people's genuine concern, it's going to affect the way that they use the inner city, then we need to be flexible and we might need to change those.
The inspiration originally was a poem that was just dealing with domestic violence, and I just interpreted it from there and took it and did what I felt was applicable for it. Because acting and directing is really hard because you can't watch your monitor, you can't see what's going on, so after every take we'd have to come back and look at it and decide whether that was what I wanted or not. So it really should have only taken a day, but it ended up taking 2 to shoot.
Basically, we had a couple of exercises to do, and I'm just searching around for a particular exercise to do, and I didn't know Bronwyn White from the dance company, and snavelled her.
I lived in Mayfield and I was really distraught about the conditions of BHP. I thought it was distressing that the elderly had lived there, especially my neighbours in Vine Street had lived there for 60 years. Didn't seem to bother them, they hadn't moved, they'd lived there for a long time, so that inspired me just to explore that.
.16-year-old Jamie Heath is one of the youngest cricketers ever selected in a Newcastle Open team. The Blacksmiths youngster will be an opening bowler for Newcastle on the weekend against Illawarra.
Yeah, we've got some young people in the side this time, playing their first and second games, particularly Jamie Heath, who's a 16-year-old, and it's his representative debut, and he'd probably be the youngest person since Gary Gilmore in the late 60s to play for Newcastle.
Other inexperienced players to represent the city will be 19-year-old fast-medium bowler and brilliant batsman Michael Gerrits and 20-year-old all-rounder Phil Stanbridge. The Intercity Challenge Cup is held by Wollongong, who won the trophy in 1991. Newcastle had no chance of retribution last year due to a washout, but are keen to win it back this weekend at Fig Tree Oval. Jason Neuenhoff, NBN News.
Professor Pierre Boehm is head of the National Health and Medical Research Council's Suicide Prevention Committee. He's one of many leading authorities addressing a 2-day seminar in Newcastle. Professor Boehm is preparing Australia's first national strategy on suicide.
It's not a way to impose our beliefs, but rather to hope to have a framework that's going to integrate our activities so that we can not only be more effective, but we can measure our effectiveness and see whether, in fact, what we're going to put in place is going to make a difference.
Recent studies show that a person's memory could help doctors better predict those at greatest risk of attempting suicide. Results show people suffering depression find it difficult to remember happy times, focusing only on the bad.
And what that means that when you try to remember how your life is going, you can only remember a series of arguments and failures and disappointments from the past. We are trying to use this measure of memory to see if that will distinguish people who are just depressed from people who are depressed and then will become hopeless and then will end their own life.
Based in the United Kingdom, Professor Mark Williams believes some suicides could be prevented if the subject was more openly spoken about.
There are many doctors who have in the past thought, well, I'm not going to talk about suicide or the possibility because it might put the idea into somebody's head. But in general, if people are thinking suicidal thoughts, if they're feeling at the end of their tether that life isn't worth living, it's better to share it with somebody.
It was a stinker at 9 this morning. The temperature was already in the 30s and the beach seemed the only place to be. The weather was the talk of the day, with the watchers keeping an eye on the mercury. It peaked in Newcastle at 3 this afternoon, more than 10 degrees above the average maximum for November.
It's 35 degrees.
In the country, temperatures were even higher, Gloucester peaking at 39 degrees, one off the state maximum. There was little relief from the hot weather for most of the day, with winds of up to 25 kilometres an hour fanning the heat wave. NBN weatherman Nat Jeffrey says we are experiencing almost tropical weather.
Simply, advection of very warm tropical air from Queensland down into northern New South Wales, combined with low pressure, very unstable conditions over the western parts of New South Wales. As heat continues to build during the day, we're seeing showers and thunderstorms occurring during the afternoon.
Right on call, the front came through late this afternoon, cooling everyone down. The word is it will be hot tomorrow morning, with temperatures easing in the afternoon. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
Nearly the whole game was played in heavy rain, but Sydney's goalie must have been trying to dry his boots out because his air swing was nowhere near the ball, leaving Rod Brown with an open goal. A few minutes later, Brown again drew the goalie out, but this time the shot was stopped. Warren Spink is now the league's leading goal scorer after notching up the Breakers' second for the night, but less than a minute later Sydney hit back, picking up a goal during a lapse in Newcastle's concentration. The second half was fairly spiteful, the Breakers full of confidence and not afraid to show it. But while tempers flared on-field, the cameramen were keeping their cool. With only minutes left in the game, Brown bagged his second for the night and the crowd went wild. It's not every day a fifth-place team beats the competition leaders.
More than 500 people turned up at the primary school to celebrate its 40th birthday, together with the opening of $300,000 worth of refurbishments. The school's P&C Association put on a gala fete for the occasion. Students past and present attended the school to admire its new face, which took workers a year to complete. The school's library and some of its classrooms and offices were remodelled with the $300,000 state grant. The celebrations will continue tonight when a reunion of past students and staff begins at 7:30 at Taree Group 3 Leagues Club. Jason Neuenhoff, NBN News. The Chamber believes the proposed new council levy on businesses would pay for the beautification. The relocation of the RSL Club has focused attention away from the Port Macquarie CBD, a situation the Chamber says Hastings Council's city centre plan could change. Property owners, tenants and councillors met at the Macquarie Hotel last night to discuss the idea. The overwhelming show of support means the CBD rejuvenation plan will be considered by Hastings Council before Christmas. If Council approves the project, it's expected to start next year. Jason Neuenhoff, NBN News. The standard of Little athletics at the Zone Championships was high on the first day of competition. 4 records were broken by the afternoon.
T. Kennington from Port Macquarie has taken the under-8 long jump record. We've had Tim Harwin from the Taree Club has actually broken the record in the 200 metre hurdles and also the triple jump. And a young lady from Moorland, I. Pullen, has broken the 200 metre hurdles.
12 clubs from Stewart's Point in the north to Gloucester in the south are taking part in the titles. Children from 5 to 15-year-olds are vying for a spot in the zone squad. The top 3 place getters in all the events, such as high jump, long and short distance running and shot put, will make the cut. The zone team will travel to Newcastle in February to compete in the Northern New South Wales Regional Carnival. Jason Neuenhoff, NBN News.
Watch the jockey in the centre of the screen in yellow. Within metres of the line, something on the saddle snaps and he falls. Peter Losh quickly jumped to his feet and although shaken and bruised wasn't hurt. His horse though was disqualified. The winner, Famous Nick, paid $7.30 and $2.60. In Melbourne the feature race was race 6, the Telecom Eclipse Handicap. 1, 9 and 12, the Quinella 100 and 360 and the trifecta, big enough to keep the rainy weekend blues away. And in Newcastle it was a benefit day for the rescue helicopter and a few horses made their debut for the chopper. Eight, 2 and 6, Durness paid $4.40 and $2.
Like to at least for a while because
2, 3, up.
Yeah.
Someone will get this.
Water side or hillside?
Water side or hillside? Water side.
Right.
And there's another shed.
Quite heavy.
I know if you had cake.
Where's the little bum? No, don't worry about it.
37-year-old Leslie Jane King from Merriweather died about 6 o'clock last night when her vehicle slid on the wet road into an oncoming southbound car at Cams Wharf. The 51-year-old Sydney driver of the other car and his 20-year-old passenger were both injured in the crash. They suffered multiple injuries and are in a stable condition at the John Hunter Hospital. George Crosby's property fronts the area where yesterday's incident occurred. He says he's lost track of the number of drivers who've lost control of their vehicles on this part of the highway.
You can almost guarantee whenever it rains there will be one spin.
About 3 years ago, one car jumped the embankment and landed in his front yard. Usually they slide across the highway.
They finished up either going across the other lanes of southbound traffic or onto the lake side of the road, which means they don't hit any other traffic, but they finish up in the trees or up the bank.
Last Tuesday, a 20-year-old truck driver died when his semi overturned on the Pacific Highway near Catherine Hill Bay turnoff. Local residents want improvements made to the highway between Nords Wharf and Catherine Hill Bay. Instruments were tuned for the annual Community Band Festival. School bands joined more experienced players in the day-long musical event on the lake foreshore.
You might hear songs on the radio, but it's different when you're sitting there playing them.
Each year, Lake Council gives money to bands in the area.
We have many quite famous musicians who've gone on to big things nationally and internationally, who started out in a primary school band in Lake Macquarie.
The last one to spit the dummy will win a $25,000 car. 40 people began sucking at 7 o'clock on Friday night. With a 10-minute break every hour and a 25-minute break every 12 hours, most competitors found they couldn't make the distance. The car is still up for grabs, with 10 exhausted entrants still seeking comfort from their pacifiers. Each one determined that a weekend of childish fun will have them in the driver's seat.
Also had a competition for the
or somewhere.
And they have not slept since 7 o'clock.
The plan formed by the Terrigal Chamber of Commerce would link Terrigal Lagoon with the Haven and involve a facelift for the beachfront. Gosford Council has contributed $15,000 to the feasibility study, with the funding being met equally by Public Works. Councillor Tony Sansom says it's hoped the boardwalk could be extended to the new visitor centre, and he's looking forward to a favourable study.
Terrigal is seen as the #1 tourist destination on the Central Coast. Terrigal is looking a little bit tired at present. The facilities don't meet the demands placed on it by local residents and by visitors to the area, and we will get a major facelift. And on top of that, we will get some recreational activities with the boardwalk.
The cost of the boardwalk and associated works is estimated at $1.5 million, and Councillor Sansom is confident the state and federal governments will come through with the funding.
$750,000 from the Public Works Department and $750,000 from the Federal Regional Tourism Program. With that money, we can undertake and complete the project.
If the cash is forthcoming, the project could be completed by mid-1995. Jenny Crouch, NBN News.
Narrabri farmer Keith Pitt was in town when the storm hit on Saturday evening, so it was daylight Sunday before he realised the extent of the devastation. The wind and hail had stripped his cotton to the stalk. Many parts of the paddock were just damp earth. A 200-hectare sorghum crop was dealt the same treatment. Keith's barley fared little better, with 80% of it rendered unharvestable, and the sunflower was chopped in half by the bullet-like hail. But he could still smile.
Yeah, we were very, very lucky, really. We'd just taken off a wheat crop that went round about 2¼ tonnes to the acre.
The clean-up was in full swing today, tidying up a huge tree brought down and arranging to repair a cotton trailer which was slammed into the ground, narrowly missing a $60,000 planter. The storm also caused about $5,000 damage to the workman's cottage on the property. But Keith Pitt is not daunted.
If we get any more rain on it between now and then, we might have to look for some other crop, maybe a soybean crop or something like that, you know.
The boxers all came face to face today. Shannon Taylor, though, couldn't keep his eyes off his Hispanic opponent. Throughout the entire conference, Taylor gave him the evil eye. Lewis Masonette's trainer repeated his claims that Taylor is far too inexperienced and they're really here for a holiday.
We're going to fight Carlos Gonzalez in LA a month and a half ago, and he was 37-1 with 34 knockouts, you know. And we were confident we were going to win that, so when he said he's 5-0, I said, oh man, I can't turn this down, you know. So and a trip to Australia on top, so we couldn't believe it.
Shannon says the talk is only inspiring him.
You can mouth off and it's just putting fuel in on the fire, which is burning inside my stomach.
And when he hit the gym this afternoon, the fire was burning with intensity. Across town, Masonette looked more than capable of extending his knockout record to 16 from 19 pro fights. Tom, the altar boy Alexander, wanted to lash out in his last sparring session, and he hasn't got a bad face for a guy who's been boxing nearly all of his 30 years.
I haven't been hit, never been knocked out. You start getting knocked out, you get old quick, but I don't feel I'm in that category of old yet.
Australia's boxing pretty boy Graham Spike Cheney sat out training today after a surprise loss earlier this year to a kickboxer. He says a win will get him back on track.
That loss was, as I said, very distressing. It was something that I didn't want in my career, and it happened. But like anything else, I've always put that behind me.
Darren Curtis, NBN News.
This was the first meeting of the group proposing the tourist attraction. It's an interdenominational Christian group which is also behind a plan to build a Noah's Ark theme park at Saltash. The Earthcare Exhibition and Education Centre for the Maryland area is only at the conceptual stage, but the plan is to establish a park focusing on environmental issues. It would also provide accommodation for university students and include a chapel and a mini rainforest. Newcastle Council has been approached to supply land to build the attraction. It would survive financially off travellers from the nearby freeway. To get the project off the ground, the group is depending on funding from the federal government. They see the proposal as a worthwhile employment generator. The next meeting to discuss the idea will be held in January.
The use of satellites by business for the transfer of information is on the increase. Tunra's Industrial Electronics Division has solved a major problem for computer users of satellite technology by developing a program which stops data being lost when interference from the sun, or solar outs as they're known, occur. Division Manager Ian Dick says the problem was revealed during a business visit to Indonesia. Systems engineer Brian Stephen developed the software after researching the occurrence of sun interference. The program, which allows computers to shut down during the danger periods, has impressed its Indonesian users and is expected to be marketed globally by Tunra. Success of the project comes as the Industrial Electronics Division awaits word on new contracts for its core business, satellite antenna tracking and control units. The division is understood to be in the running for projects in Indonesia and with the Australian Defence Department.
At 11 years of age when she died in New Zealand last week, Eve Van Graaphorst was old enough to be in high school. Had she stayed on the Central Coast after being infected with the AIDS virus through a blood transfusion, Eve may well have attended Kincumber High School with these students. For the past 9 months, dozens of Year 7 through to Year 11 Kincumber students have been voluntarily attending lunchtime AIDS awareness discussion sessions. In recent weeks, they've been preparing banners to display at local shopping centres and parks on World AIDS Day next Wednesday. Bruce Atchison, who initiated the awareness program, realised a need in the Kincumber community to learn about AIDS and is starting with the children. So far, he appears to be achieving his goal. Eve's death has reinforced the importance of the awareness program.
Eve Van Graaphorst did nothing wrong to anybody, and she was, a victim of this disease. I mean, we have to understand that, we have to be a caring community, and people with HIV need our care.
Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
Representatives of 15 councils from the Central Coast to the Upper Hunter were in Newcastle for the mock disaster. They were given a detailed briefing on 4 cases of the illness contracted in recent days.
A number of cases of Legionnaires have been notified to the Hunter Health Unit, and the scenario is that they have all been isolated to a jogging group that exercise over lunchtime around the CBD of Newcastle. So we're sampling 5 different sites throughout the CBD area.
As the investigation teams assembled their testing equipment, it marked the first trial for the Hunters Reaction Plan formulated during the past year.
And they've worked really hard, I think, to apply what is a fairly general plan for statewide use to our area. And what we're doing today really is giving that a run through to make sure that it all works.
In the field, response teams carried out their duties as they would if a real Legionella outbreak was being traced. Protective clothing and masks were donned for testing cooling towers in air conditioners, which are considered a primary source of the bacteria. New legislation is making it easier for authorities to isolate an outbreak.
We're fortunate now that legislation requires councils to have registers of air conditioning systems, so that where we get outbreaks like this, then we can immediately get all of that information from councils and without too much trouble and quite quickly.
Results of the exercise will be assessed, with another mock emergency expected to be staged next year.